All right. Good evening, everybody. It's good to see y'all tonight. Welcome to the Maximize Your Life Bible Study. I am Minister Marcus. And what I do is I help people to enhance their spiritual walk with God. I help people to get closer to God. I teach people what God's patterns are like, so you know how to correctly align your life, with God's principles and things like that. So that's my specific calling. I'm here to help people navigate their relationship with God, and so that when God moves, you don't be out of place. So you catch whatever flow God is in. And so that's what I do. I'm here to guide people into a better relationship with God. Um, and so what I do on Wednesday nights is I just do simple Bible lessons that you can apply, practical Bible lessons that you can apply to your everyday life. I believe a lot of times why we miss it, and it's in one of the parables that Jesus says, is that people that say it, they'll quote you a scripture, but they don't get a correct understanding. And if you don't have a correct understanding, you can't apply it the correct way. And when you misapply, then you don't ever see the blessing of understanding scripture and applying scripture. So that's what I do. Because for me, when I first started, man, it was difficult really trying to learn and grow and enhance my walk with God, because I had so many people that were around me, but they trying to manipulate my spirituality in so many words. And so I'm just here to help be a guide. And so tonight, man, we're going to Galatians chapter 2, verse 7 through 9. And I got Big Green tonight. I like the way it reads. Galatians chapter 2, it's in the New Testament, verse 7, 8, and 9. And tonight we talk about being different. You were created to be different. You are destined to be different. Understanding that we are made similar, but we were all made to be different. So Galatians chapter 2, verse 7 through 9, it reads, they saw that God, this is Paul talking, they saw that God had given me the responsibility of preaching the good news to the Gentiles, just as he had given Peter the responsibility of preaching to the Jews. For the same God who worked through Peter for the benefit of the Jews worked through me for the benefit of the Gentiles. In fact, Peter, James, and John, who were known as pillars of the church, recognized the gift God had given me, and they accepted Barnabas and me as their co-workers. They encouraged us to keep preaching to the Gentiles while they continued their work with the Jews. All right, and so that's reading out of the Life Application Study Bible. It is a New Living Translation, and I read that just so we could get a kind of a picture that Peter was sent to the Jews, while Paul was sent to the Gentiles. And so I'm going to start tonight just by saying that you were made to be different. You were made to be different, similar, but different. And I think that's very significant, because so many times the fact that we are different from each other, instead of being celebrated, is criticized, especially in the school system. It's gotten a little bit different now, but back when I was in school, you had to talk a certain way, you had to be a certain way, you had to dress a certain way, right? And if you didn't, because you were different, you were teased or you were belittled, right? And then you get grown, and it's kind of like the same thing when you get a job. Everybody expects you to do a certain thing or be a certain way or act a certain way, and if you're not, you're kind of ousted or ostracized. We don't take the time to celebrate the differences, but most of the time people are criticized for being different. And I just want to say, sometimes it's difficult to be different. Sometimes it's not easy to step out. I was just like this, man. If I'm gonna get in trouble, I'm gonna get in trouble for something that I did. I'm not gonna get in trouble for running with the crowd. If I get sent to the office or suspended, it's gonna be for something that I did. It ain't gonna be because I'm trying to be like nobody else. And so I guess I'm not gonna say I never just cared, but I knew that, I was just going to be my own person. And I think it's significant because sometimes we don't have the inner strength to just be who God made us to be what God made us to be. Some of the jokes that they made in school, it wasn't funny to me. You know what I'm saying? They talking about kids or whatever. That, some stuff, it wasn't funny to me. And I didn't laugh. I didn't act like it was funny. I didn't go along with the crowd. And so a lot of times what we do is we'll go along to get along. We'll go along with the crowd or the popular opinion, right? Whether it's a part of who we are, whether we not. And I want to take the time out tonight to just express that the differences are not to be criticized, but the differences are to be celebrated. We don't recognize, right, that the reason why God makes us different is so that one person's strengths can overshadow the next person's weaknesses. And so we were all made different to perceive different, right? Because he never gives one person the complete picture of one specific thing, but he gives us all different perspectives, right? So that we all have to come together and work together and utilize one another. And so the understanding is that our differences are not supposed to be criticized, but they're supposed to be celebrated. And sometimes we spend our time trying to look like everybody else, trying to dress like everybody else, trying to act like everybody else, trying to behave like everybody else. Even for those of us who are grown, try to live, they say, keeping up with the Joneses, try to live like everybody else. And we don't really take the time to appreciate who God created us to be in our own uniqueness. And so I like to say it like this: sometimes people quit too soon before they ever get a chance to tap into the power of their own uniqueness. And I want to stress that, because as long as you're trying to be somebody else, you will never get those things that God has specifically set aside just for you. And I want to stress that because sometimes we get envious of people, or we become, we want to be like them, but not recognizing that when you become like somebody else, or when you try to do something like me, I'm a minister, and I know a lot of ministers and a lot of people, they try to preach like T.D. Jakes, or they try to preach like Noel Jones or Clarence McClendon or whatever. But at the end of the day, you forfeit yourself of the things that God specifically has for you. And so that's why my biggest thing is, I can't say it like T.D. Jakes said. I have to find my own voice. Because where my voice is, this is what the Bible says, that my sheep know my voice. And T.D. Jakes' sheep know his voice. Noah Jones' sheep know his voice. But the thing is if I never find my voice, I never find my sheep. And so if I never find my voice, I never find what God has for me. And so the word for tonight is that God made you different for a reason. And I want to stress that God has made you different for a reason. You are not here to be like everybody else. We are not made to be drones, but God put us all here for different reasons. And that's why sometimes I kind of had a problem with some of my church brothers and sisters, because they all wanted us to dress a certain way because we were preachers, or to talk a certain way because we were in church. And my thing is, God made me to be who I am. And so when we look tonight at Galatians chapter 2, verse 7 through 9, I think it's very significant, because Paul addresses the fact that his calling was not like Peter's calling. Even though Peter was called by God and was being used by God and was being chosen by God, Paul recognized that his calling was not like Peter's. And he says that, Peter, you were called to the Jews, but I recognize that I was called to the Gentiles. And sometimes what we do is we try to fit in where we don't belong. We try to fit in where we don't belong. Have you ever tried to fit into a place that you don't belong, at a job, right, that you don't belong? And it's frustrating when you try to fit yourself into a space, right, that's not specifically made for you. Have you ever been putting a puzzle piece together and you tried to force in a piece that didn't belong? It just didn't go in. It didn't work right. And sometimes we try to force ourselves into places, right, that we don't belong, and wonder why we're so frustrated, right? Anytime you try to force a piece in that it doesn't go, it's always going to be out of place. And sometimes we try to force ourselves into relationships. We try to force ourselves into jobs. We try to force ourselves in friendships. And in reality, if you are out of place, you're never going to feel right. And so I want to stress that tonight, that sometimes you can be doing the right thing in the wrong place, and you are never going to find that place of fulfillment. And so I like to use this analogy, and I used this a couple weeks ago on Sunday morning, putting a squirrel in the desert, right? Everything in the desert is built to live in the desert. The cactus is built to live in the desert. The snakes are built to live in the desert. Scorpions are built to live in the desert. Sand is for the desert. Everything that belongs in the desert is in the desert. And if you take a squirrel out of his natural environment and you put it in the desert, a squirrel is going to feel like he's out of place. Imagine a squirrel being raised in the desert. He's going to always feel out of place. He's going to always feel like he's not equipped. He's going to always feel like he's not enough. And I want you to consider, right, that maybe you have been doing the right thing in the wrong place, right? And you criticizing yourself, not recognizing, right, that God made you different for a reason. And if you are not operating, or if you're not functioning at the best of your ability, maybe it's not you. Maybe it's the place that you're in. I want you to consider this, right? That if you put a squirrel in the desert, to the scorpion, the squirrel is going to look funny, right? To the snake, the squirrel is going to look funny. The squirrel can't survive in that environment. And sometimes we try to force ourselves into places that we don't belong. And then we get a negative self-image, right? Not recognizing that if you were just to insert yourself into the place that you do belong, then you'll find your superpower. Could it be that you may be feeling out of place because you are actually out of place? Maybe the job that you have is not for you. And you know what? I don't like to tear people's relationship up, but I do want you to think maybe the relationship that you're in is just, maybe it's just not for you. So, you know, I did it for such a long time, man, tried to force myself into places that I did not belong. And then I wondered why my life was so frustrating. I wonder why my life was so in turmoil, right? Because I was trying to force myself into places that I didn't belong. Marcus, you have a skill. Why are you working at a warehouse? Marcus, you got a skill. Why are you doing these things that are beneath you? And I was trying to force myself. And so I had to get to the point, right, where I had to start praying like, God, show me where my place is. Show me where, we're talking about being different tonight. Show me where my place is. This is what God had to do with Moses. Moses, I know you've been living this way, right? But let me show you who you really are. Gideon, I know you've been going about it this way, but let me show you who you really are. And David, I know that you've been doing it this way. You've been a shepherd, but let me show you who you really are. And I had to take that time and look, while we're talking about being different tonight, I want you to consider, right, that you know, a lot of people, they discredit the whole church movement, and I get it. You know, we got too many pastors that's manipulative. You know, we got too many people in the church that'll manipulate you, especially if you're a new Christian. But I want you to get this, that nobody can tell you where you belong like God can tell you where you belong. Nobody can show you like God can show you. Nobody can usher you into your place like God can. I remember I was working at a job and I was a warehouse manager. I was making decent money, right? But then it came a time where I just ended up having to quit. And then I finally asked God, God, bless me with the kind of job that I'm gonna like going to work. And then it's at this point that God made me recognize, you have a skill. Why not go and try to find a job in what you went to school to do? And when I did that, right, jobs immediately start. I never, right now to this day, I want y'all to hear me. I never had a problem trying to find a job. Why? Because I found my place. And when I found my place, that's what a purpose, that's what a prize is. And so I want you to understand, it's not always about church, but it's about finding your place in life. And this is what I want to stress to people. And this is why it's not about having a church movement. It's about having a God movement, because only God can lead your life to the place that you belong. And I want you to get this, that sometimes you think you belong in one place, but then when you start to really consult God about where you belong, he might lead you down a totally different path. He says to Paul, Peter, I know you've been preaching to the Jews, but Paul, I need you to go preach to the Gentiles. And I want you to get this, that maybe God wants to use you in a different way. Look, maybe God wants to use you in a different way. Everybody not called to preach. Back in when I was, when I accepted my call, it was like everybody ready to preach. Everybody wanted to, get behind the mic. And my thing is, if that's where you at, then cool. But you got to be sure about where God is trying to take you. And I want you to consider that, man. Sometimes we think we belong in one place, And really, things don't line up in your life because God is trying to get you to understand maybe this is just not for you. Maybe you are called to do something different. Maybe you are called to operate in a place that is different. He says to Paul, Paul, I want to use you in a different way. And I want to stress, right, because sometimes it's difficult. It's so difficult when you've seen it done a certain way for so long. Everybody that had come along before Paul, everybody was sent to the Jews. And now God immediately changes Paul to be sent to the Gentiles. What do you do when God calls you to stand in places that you haven't seen people stand in, or to work in places that you haven't seen people work in, right? Or do things that you haven't seen people do? And I love to use this, right, as an analogy, because so many young men that I talk to who were raised without fathers in their house, right? But now they are fathers themselves. And what do you do when God calls you to stand or to work or to operate in the place, right, that you haven't seen model before you? It's difficult. I want to tell that to somebody. It's difficult to walk the different path, but that don't mean don't walk it, right? It's difficult to stand where you've seen others fall, but that don't mean stop standing. And I want you to get this tonight, that different is difficult, right? But that does not mean that you forfeit it. It's difficult because it forces you to come out of the way you think. I never understood this, right? But when I started having kids, and my father was in my life, but I saw that God wanted me to be a different kind of father to my kids, right? There was some things that God wanted me to change up. And so I had to change my mind about some things, right? And then it started to occur to me that maybe I was made this way, right, for this purpose. And I want you to get this, right, that God may be calling you to be different. He wants to do something new in your life. He wants to do something different. And I say it like this, I marketize it, right? If you want to see something different, you got to be ready to do something different. I believe this. I believe that sometimes what we have seen model before is like one of the things that I had to start praying, right? That God, I want to see something different in my life. I seen paycheck to paycheck, right? I seen, not having enough. I seen begging or whatever. I don't want to do that for the rest of my life. You know what I'm saying? I want to see something different. And here's my thing to us tonight. That's why we're talking about being different. Maybe God created you to be different because he wants to do something different in your life. Maybe God don't want you to have that life, but the problem with us is that we get stuck, right? We get stuck in what's comfortable. We get stuck in what's familiar, and then we stop the flow because we don't recognize that God is trying to do something different in your life. What if God wanted you to be the one to bring generational wealth to your family? What if God wanted you to be the one, right, to live in the house and not live paycheck to paycheck, not have to worry about struggles, right? What if God wanted you to be the one to be the entrepreneur? What if God wanted you to do something different in your life, but you are stuck in the place that you are, stuck in the same mindset, right? With the same attitude, with the same, doing the same things, looking for different results. My question to you tonight is, what if God is calling you to be the difference, not just for you, but for your family? Consider the reason why things may not be lining up in your life is because you're trying to stay the same while God is trying to make you become different. And I want to stress this tonight that we're talking about being different. You cannot keep the same habits and expect something different to come. You cannot keep the same attitude and expect something. You cannot keep the same behavior and expect something different. The thought patterns, you got to change it. Come on, say, God, I want to be different. I want to see different. I want you to get this, right? He says to Paul, I'm calling you to somebody different. I'm calling you to somebody different. What if he does for you what he does to Abraham? Abraham, I want to do something so amazing in your life that it's going to take you to leave your entire, I want you to leave your mom, leave your dad, leave your brothers, leave your cousins, leave your aunties, leave everybody. Because what I'm going to do in your life is so different. I don't even want you to think like what you came from. I don't want you to see where you came from. I want you to dare to see different, to want something different. And I want you to consider that, right? We have got to open ourselves to different. Start believing God for something different. I had to do that. Now, I had to do that. I wanted to do church, but I wanted to do church different. I was tired of the same. Come on. And you know what? I don't know who this is for tonight, but I want you to get this, that God made you different for a reason. God made you different for a reason. I want you to say that God made me different for a reason. And I want you to consider this, and I'm going to be done, right? But I want you to get this, that just like a key, you were created for a different reason. Every single key is created for a different reason. And I want you to get this, right? That to one key, another key may look funny, right? To a big key, a small key may look funny. To a small key, a big key may look funny. But watch this. You don't understand the significance of why the keys look the way they look until they get to a door, right? That only that key can open. And I want you to get this. I didn't realize that me being different, my difference was my superpower until I found the door that only I could open. And I want to stress that to you tonight, right? That it's a saying that goes, what God has for me, it is for me. What God has for you, it is for you. But the thing is that we resist our own differences, or we criticize ourselves for thinking different or for being different, not recognizing that just like a key, you were created for a different purpose. And so I had to start praying this. God, lead me to my lane. What door does my personal uniqueness open? And I got this. Once I found my lane, then I could dominate my lane. What door does my uniqueness open? Then I want you to consider that, man. Maybe you were made different for a reason. Maybe you were, and I talk to so many young people, right? Especially my young ladies. My heart go out for my young ladies, right? For my young ladies, like, you never know. God made you the way that he made you for a reason. And you just got to figure out why. And so I can't tell you why. I can guide you, right, to find your why, but only God can show you that. And so tonight, if I could leave anything with you tonight, you were created different for a reason, but only God can take you to that. Only God can show you why. Just like it is with a key. For every groove that the key has in it, once it gets to the specific lock that it's supposed to open, then the cuts make sense. And I want you to get that sometimes you don't understand why you are the way that you are. You don't understand why things had to turn out the way that they turn out until you get to the place that you actually belong. And so tonight, if I could leave you with anything, know that you were destined to be different. God made you different for a reason. Don't criticize it. Don't develop low self-esteem because you're not like everybody else. Find your lane and dominate your lane. And so with that, man, tonight, hopefully something I said could encourage you. That wasn't real deep right there, but that is just something for you, for your minds tonight, man. God made you to be different for a reason. It wasn't long at all. So listen, go check out our ministry. We are a 501c3 nonprofit organization as well as a church. So we are able to reach out and do a whole lot of outreach. Matter of fact, this month we got an event coming up where I think we're going to be feeding the homeless, if I'm not mistaken. So, man, if you want to volunteer for that, go to our website. If you just want to find out more about our ministry, go to our website. It's www.thegodmovement.com. And it is definitely a movement. It's slow rolling, right? But we are rolling slow. So for everything that you give, just know it's going towards a greater cause. We went to a nursing home in February and passed out some things for the elderly for Valentine's Day. We did something in December for some students. We fed the homeless in November. Like, everything that you give, for those of you who do give, it is appreciated. But just know that it is used to bless somebody else. That's what this ministry is all about. And so hopefully, man, you got something from our Bible study tonight. If you can, check out our services early on Sunday morning at 8:15. We normally out of there by 9:30, 9:45. But if you can't, I'll see you guys next week. Remember, once again, go check out the website, www www.thegodmovement.com and find out all of the many things that we are doing. You can be a part. It'll lead you to everything, our YouTube channel, our Facebook page, our Instagram. You can click on, it has everything, right? So just go there and check it out. Hopefully you were blessed, man. I'll see all you guys next week. Thank y'all for tuning in to my TGMites. Thank y'all for tuning in for TGM Television, for my Instagram crew, and for my Facebook Live crew. Thank you guys for tuning in. I'll see y'all next week. All right. K3. Robin tuned in. Oh. Welcome to the Maximize Your Life. Understand why things had to turn out the way that they turned out until you to the place that you actually belong. And so tonight, if I could leave you with anything, know that you were destined to be different. God made you different for a reason. Don't criticize it. Don't develop low self-esteem because you're not like everybody else. Find your lane.